Strong values and strong opinions. The Mike Broomhead Show. KTAR News, 92.3 FM, and the KTAR News app.
Hey, thanks again for being here. Appreciate you spending some time with us. COVID-19 obviously still on the front of everyone's mind. What we're going to do, how we're going to fix this problem. The President of the United States, after weeks of his administration and multiple people associated with the administration saying that the government cannot enforce mandates, and it's just not something we can do. Those are the words of Nancy Pelosi. Reversed course and said that there are going to be vaccine mandates here in the U.S. One of the first attorney generals in the country to step forward and say that we are going to do something about this, or at least file a case, is our Attorney General, Mark Brnovich. He joins us. Attorney General Brnovich, let's start here. What's the premise of why you believe this is illegal? Is it multifaceted, or are you focused on one specific thing?
Yeah, thank you, Mike, for having me on. And I would just say this is the opening salvo in what I think is a very, very important battle on not only public health, but on federalism and the size and the scope of the federal government. So our lawsuit, it was the very first one in the country. We basically argue that the Biden administration's attempt to promulgate rules or mandate a vaccine is an infringement on individual liberty. It violates traditional notions of federalism, and it's a great power grab by the federal government. And specifically, in our pleadings, we talk about the fact that the Constitution provides that the president's powers are limited, and he does not have any authority anywhere in the Constitution or even statutorily to try to attempt what he's doing. And secondly, even if he could do this, the fact that he has systematically said that if you are a non-citizen, if you've entered the country illegally, you don't have to get the vaccine no matter what you do. But if you're a contractor, a federal employee, a business that does business, or a business that has contracts with the federal government, you have to have everyone vaccinated. I mean, clearly, he is literally preferencing or giving a benefit to people in the country that are here illegally versus people that are hardworking American citizens and taxpayers. So, in short, he does not have the authority to do this, and even if he did have the authority, the way he's doing it is clearly unconstitutional.
How quickly will this be heard, do you believe, and how far up do you think this is going to go before it's finally resolved?
Well, the government, the Biden administration, will have 60 days to respond. We're doing everything we can to try to implement this quickly to get it stopped, and it's one of the reasons why we wanted to get this lawsuit filed right away. I do think, and I do predict, Mike, that as soon as the Biden administration tries to promulgate any rules, you will see additional lawsuits. And I know that I've talked to some of my colleagues, attorneys general in other states, and we already have some other legal theories. I mean, and there's things involving whether OSHA can even promulgate any of these rules. And so I think this is just the opening salvo. It's the first torpedo in the water, so to speak. But we are going to be doing everything we can to make sure the federal government plays by the rules. It does what it's constitutionally allowed to do. And we know that historically, and even the case law on this is that issues of public health, safety, and welfare were meant to left to the states. And that's why even, yesterday, I was talking to some other reporter nationally, and they're like, what about the 1905 case? And look, the reality is that was a case out of state Supreme Court. It didn't involve the federal government's power, and because the Supreme Court understood that traditionally public health, safety, welfare is left to the states. And furthermore, in that case, the fine was $5. I mean, it was de minimis. What the federal government, what Biden is proposing now, is essentially to destroy people's livelihoods if they don't affirmatively inject something into them that may be against their religious beliefs or something they just don't want. It's an invasion of privacy at the worst level by the federal government.
Can you tell us how many other attorney generals across the country you've spoken with on this? How many of you are talking about these cases?
I've talked to a lot of my colleagues because there is a lot of concern throughout this country, not only about the government mandating vaccines, but this understanding that if you allow the federal government to start affirmatively saying that they can do this, that they can mandate it, that means the federal government has unfettered power. Think about it, Mike. I mean, it's not only just saying you have to buy insurance or something like that. They are literally saying you have to put something in your body because the president says it's good for you. I mean, that's what they do in communist countries. And that is why our Constitution was designed to protect our individual liberty. And the whole structure of government was meant to make sure that, that you have this tension not only between the executive, judicial, and legislative branches, but the states. So this should be an issue. This should be an issue where we have 50 checks on the Biden administration. And that is every state making sure that we say loudly and clearly the Biden administration vaccine mandates is unconstitutional, and they do not have the authority to do this. And if you allow, regardless of what you think about the vaccine, regardless of what you think about public health and everything else, the point is the federal government cannot be doing this. And once you allow them to do it, think about it, on the other side. You know, if you had a Democrat, if you had a Republican president mandating that, you know, you had to inject something into you for public health and good. I mean, think about how outraged people be. You have the ACLU suing and everybody else. And so I just think it's important as a matter of intellectual consistency and federalism that we understand that regardless of what you think about the vaccines, this notion that the president unilaterally can order something that may affect more than 100 million Americans is really abhorrent to the Constitution and the way the framers designed this country.
It's also odd that he's going through OSHA and using that agency as a way to enforce this with business owners and companies of 100 employees or more. How does OSHA enforce something like this? I mean, it doesn't seem to be in their wheelhouse or in their purview to be able to enforce this.
Yeah, I do think that what they are proposing, just based on what they've said, is constitutionally suspect. So I do think that there's a legitimate question whether OSHA has any of this authority to begin with. That being said, and we included this in our pleadings, and people can go to azag.com or gov and find all of our stuff, but literally you had the president's own chief of staff retweeting that this was the ultimate workaround. We know that even the president's spokesman talk about how they were trying to get around the law. And so, you know, as a lawyer, that's going to help us in litigation. But as a citizen, that should concern you, the fact that the Biden administration is that arrogant and there's that much hubris that they literally are advertising that, they know what they're doing is they don't probably have the authority to do so, but they're going to do it anyway because it's for the good of everyone. And that's when we always have run into problems historically, not just the United States, but other countries. When you have leadership that thinks that they're enlightened and they know what's best for everybody and they impose their will physically on people, that's ultimately that leads to tyranny and the destruction of any sort of democratic, Republican form of government.
All right, one last question, kind of off topic, but something that's topical, but not on this topic, is about the audit. The state Supreme Court saying that they have to turn those documents over. Any opinion on that? Is it as that seems to be now that the Senate's going to have to turn over all these documents?
Yeah, I think, you know, Mike, I've always said as a prosecutor, I wait till I get all the facts and evidence. We had filed a brief saying the Senate has the right to do the audit, and, you know, the court agreed with us. And so, you know, our approach has been wait and see, get all the facts, get all the evidence, get the report before commenting and doing anything on it. I learned a long time ago as a prosecutor, never predict what a court's going to do, and until you get the facts and evidence, you don't weigh in or comment on something that's still kind of pending and ongoing legally.
All right. As always, I appreciate when you're willing to come on the show. I know you're extremely busy, but this is such an important case.
Thank you, Michael.
And I appreciate you coming on and telling the audience.
Thanks, Mike.
All right, thanks. That is the Attorney General, Mark Brnovich.